Well, welcome back. We have a special guest today, uh, Sergio Pisana, and I met him at Capella University. We were at a residency uh, working on clinical interventions. He's in a master's degree program there, but also he has his own video podcast, and he invited me to be a guest. So I'm kind of reciprocating now. So, but I don't know that much about you, Sergio. You want to tell us a little more about yourself, maybe particularly about what aside from the interview with me, what else is your podcast about, and what else have you been doing?
Yes, well, first, thank you all for allowing me the privilege to join in on these. It started really just this past year, 2025. It was actually January. I had it, I don't know when exactly, maybe around 2016, 2017. I started listening to online lectures by a few psychologists, one of which is Jordan B. Peterson. And I was listening to his lectures while he was at Harvard teaching of maps of meaning. So, sort of philosophical and religious, and also psychological. And since then, I was very interested in long form discussion, long form conversation. Um, I'm kind of anti sound bites. I think depending on the nature of a topic, it's supposed to be talked about over maybe more than an hour, which usually that's what my podcast, at least an hour, up to 4 hours. I think not always the longer the better, but just giving space to have sort of streams of consciousness. So, really, uh, just pulling on the thread of my curiosity. I'm interested in psychology, I'm interested in spirituality, I'm interested in religion, I am interested in philosophy, and health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, health in families, in relationships, things of that sort. So, really, whatever the guest brings to the table, I am just interested in. I only speak with people I'm interested in speaking to. I keep it that simple and as apologetically and maybe unapologetically as I can, because at times there will be uh, people might want to come on the show, and I very politely say, I'm so sorry, I'm not interested in speaking with you. So I just keep it that simple. If I'm interested in the person and I feel this sort of, dare I say, connection, maybe whether it's intellectually or something deeper, I just talk to those people. Eventually, I want to talk to some local political candidates that are running for city commissioner, for example, mayor, things of that sort, because I'm very interested in my city and the direction it's headed. So I guess that's sort of the just creating a space for people to talk about important issues. I guess that's what the podcast is about. I'm still figuring it out, really. So I hope that made sense. I hope that long answer made sense.
Which city do you live in?
Brownsville, Texas. So it's
Okay.
the most southern point of Texas, right on the border with northern Mexico. It's called
Mhm.
Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, right there on the Gulf Coast. Uh,
I've always been fascinated by borders. Is there
yes,
a lot of intermarriage and interrelationships taking place between people from across the border?
yes. It
Mm.
is a recurring theme. It is a very interesting, noticing when I left, when I was with Dr. Sarnoff in Orange County, uh, really having a little bit of a culture shock in uh, seeing the difference with cultures. Border towns are something very unique. I have noticed now. I had not noticed it until I left, and now that I'm back, even though it was only for a
Mhm.
week that was residency,
Yeah.
it was very interesting. So yes, had you told me that, Dr. Steinberg, a few weeks ago, I would have said no. It's like anywhere else, but no, not, yes, border towns are
Yeah.
very unique and very
Border
interesting.
towns are very unique. Yeah. Wherever they are particularly unique between the
Hmm.
Dominican Republic and Haiti, between,
Mm.
India, wherever, it's just Pakistan, it's just
Right.
between Buenos Aires and any other state next to it, Brazil, and wherever countries meet and people meet to cross over Michigan and Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario.
Mm.
Lovely border town. People have good relations. It's funny how people intermarry there. Lots of trade and fashion. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
thank you
think
for
it
the
shows
question.
that the idea of division is
Mm.
really a man-made thing. It's a false thing, and in reality, in nature, we're all connected. We're all part of the same human family, and people can intermarry and they can become part of the same family. Just because
Mhm,
you live in a different place, or you have a different leader, or you do different religion, different color skin, different whatever. It's not such a barrier as it's made out to be.
mhm. It's invariable the language that emerges from that milieu, that mix, it can be quite interesting. So how did we get to the miracle thing, David? Tell us. I
Well,
mean, we want
so
to.
one thing, when Sergio invited me to be in his show, I enjoyed it, and I said, "Well, ought to come onto the podcast that I've been doing, on Fridays." And he thought, and I was telling him we are talking about active imagination and Jung's idea. And he immediately said, "Well, the miracle question." I mean, and there's a relationship there. They both involve the imagination, and I guess we can get into it more deeply. What the relationship between those two is. And of course, Jung was a long time ago in the 1800s, and the miracle question came more like, I guess, around the 70s or the 80s. And whenever marriage managed care came into town and started making psychology an industry and trying to speed it up, the miracle question was part of that solution focused therapy
Mhm,
to make things quicker. And of course,
mhm,
Americans always like something quick. And it's interesting you said you don't like the sound bites. You want to take your time, which is kind of nice. And I like the idea of taking your time and actually. I mean, to me, this is great. I'm so old fashioned. I love actually talking to people, but the sound bites are really kind of taken over in a way. I mean, everything is TikTok, right? There's a lot of pressure to hurry up and do things fast and zip by and kind of miss each other in a sense. But those connections are valuable and wonderful in my view. But anyway, so maybe you could tell. So it was kind of your idea. So tell me what you were thinking about, Sergio, when about the miracle question and active imagination. How do you see it?
Sure. Well, a little background, I guess, to set the stage. The last 2 years and a half, I've been part of the mobile crisis outreach team in my city. So I constantly, many times a day, will be speaking with people who are predominantly suicidal. And I'm only there to assess for criteria, right? But sometimes, if the opportunity presents itself, the client will ask me, "What do you think about my situation?" And I usually don't know what to say. I usually don't think about it too much, but rather I sort of hold a mirror up to them and ask this miracle question. Well, if you had it your way in a perfect world, what would this situation look like? Either coming out on the other side of it or addressing the immediate needs that is has led you to this situation, or making sense of it. Sometimes the person does not make sense of everything that has just happened, uh, circumstantial things, or if it's not circumstantial, it's something internal. And sometimes their miracle question or their answer to that, if you had it your way, what would it look like? And the simplicity of their answers have always taken me aback. uh,
What makes it a miracle question?
Because if they had anything they wanted in a perfect world, well, how a perfect world is a miracle, because you know there's there's no perfect world, at least not yet. Uh, but when they imagine, okay, if I had everything, it's almost like nobody's ever asked them that question. And so when they get posed that question, the miracle question, I guess, am I using that correctly? The miracle question, like,
Well, the way
is
they phrase it in the miracle question, say, suppose you went to sleep tonight and a miracle happened overnight that you didn't know about it because you're sleeping, but when you wake up in the morning, all your problems are solved, everything's great,
Mhm.
the world is just the way you want it. then
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
would you know that the miracle happened? And then by asking that, how would you know? Then
Yeah, that's why I was just asking what makes it a miracle question.
if you put the word
Yes,
miracle in there, if the miracle
yes,
happened,
miracle.
how would you
When it
know?
becomes a miracle question, what makes it a miracle question? Is it that when it is spoken, it draws on the other person's inspiration and intelligence? It is a question that is
Well,
unique.
I, I,
What makes it a miracle?
I would say, Stein, that it instills a sense of hope.
Mm.
Anytime when we
Well,
think
that's
of,
one of the possibilities, I guess.
And the
yeah,
possibility of a miracle, like maybe, maybe you think, well, a miracle, maybe God could somehow change
Yeah,
everything.
lots of possibilities
Miracle
in a
happen.
miracle.
But on the other hand, once they start talking about it, they realize, well, they might say, well, I would, instead of lying in bed, I would jump out of bed and open the curtains and see the sunshine coming in. And that's something that's totally under their control. They could actually do that. Notice, we are part of the miracle. And maybe we don't realize that at first, but is that what you found? That when they start talking about what it would be like, they realize that some of it is a change in them.
Right. Right. It's that hope. Uh, that hope. I think. I guess that's where my mind went to when you mentioned the miracle question, Dr. Sarnoff. That was just experientially, um, honestly asking a person, you know, if you had it your way, right? Sort of. I guess I don't use the actual terms, if a miracle were to happen, if you were to go to sleep. I don't really phrase it that way, but it's sort of pulling on the same string, asking a person who's in a really vulnerable place.
sure.
Uh, mhm.
I think I would also say I think it takes a person from the present moment, the present situation that they find themselves, and lose it future, into the future, to use that sense of hope to project into the future of what life could look like. So presently, as you indicated, they might be in a depressive, suicidal state, but if they can see themselves in the future of still being active, alive, doing whatever it is that they would like to do, then that does instill some sense of, okay, it makes life worth living, and yeah, as we said, hopeful, towards the future. And I had never really considered the relationship between the two of Jungian and the use of active imagination and the miracle question. But once I did a little research, I was like, wow, yeah, there is a very strong connection using, again, the imagination. So
Yeah, Dr.
Sergio, could
Thomas
you
did his
tell us a
homework on
bit about
the show.
Sergio, could you tell us a bit about the process to hope? Like, do they just leave A and jump to B and they get to hope? What is the process like?
Well, uh, it varies from situation to situation, right? I think I have seen it. Best case scenarios. There have been a handful of the hundreds, if not maybe by now thousands, no hundreds of people I've talked to in this, very crisis state of mind. Is a little bit of encouragement goes a very long way when the words that leave my mouth are true, and not just true as in objectively true, but they are true the way an arrow is true, right? When a bow men or whatever, when they hit the mark, it's true. I think a person can pick up when another says something and they really mean what they say. And I don't always tell people in these interviews, pretty much, that hey, you're gonna be okay, or hey, things are gonna turn out better, because sometimes I I don't want to lie to anyone, right? But there are times where there is something that I notice in them, and it's almost like I see myself in them, and I really take myself as Dr. Sarnoff alludes to a few times, that we really are all interconnected here. We really, really are. And just a little bit of encouragement when it's there, when it's present in me, I'm able to share it with them a little bit. And when they almost smell it, that it is authentic and truthful, I'm not just sugarcoating, I'm not just trying to make them feel better. I'm being genuine in, wait a minute, you could have your life back and some. It doesn't matter what was done unto you, it doesn't matter what you did unto them. There is nothing too great a grievance that cannot be redeemed and made right and make you stronger from this. So sometimes when I say that, not word for word, but when it is something akin to that, it's almost like they're a little bit lighter. You notice in their body language, their eyes open up a little bit more, considering they're sober and not under the influence of any substances, because we get a lot of those too. But yes, you can almost feel it in the air when you're in that same room with the person. Best case scenario, that's what it looks like. At least a little bit of sort of like a deep breath and exhale, like almost like a realization to, oh, yeah, it is possible because I'm still alive right now. You know, on this side of life, it's still possible. So the possibility, I think, that's the hope.
Where there's life, there's hope.
Right, right.
But there's a question that keeps on coming into my mind, which is that sometimes when you say a miracle, it could be some things that really, at least at this point, aren't possible, or usually aren't possible anyway. For example, say someone's loved one dies, right? And they feel like, oh, well, I can't live without that person. And so the miracle, you ask them, well, suppose you had it your way. Well, if I had it my way, they'd come back to life, or they wouldn't have died, or something like that. That might really not be possible. So then maybe the imagination might have to be modified, and then maybe that gets to the crux of the difference between maybe solution focus, where you kind of do anything. Well, anything's possible, you just do anything. But maybe in the Jungian idea, the idea of looking, the act of imagination, the imagination really is a window into your own soul, but there's some spiritual there's some correctness in it. In other words, if you're tapping into your true unconscious, which is connected to the collective unconscious, and it's really kind of like part of God's plan or whatever. It's some part of reality. In other words, that there's a miracle that happens where you somehow get past your grief and you're happy again, and you find new relationships, and you have a life that's equally rich and loving, even though that other loved one is just now a memory or something like that. I mean, so you have to. There's somehow I think that's where maybe there's difference between the two approaches. That just a solution focus, like, well, you pick a solution and you just go for it. But maybe sometimes if your own personal desires are really against the universe, or they're opposite of what's really happening in the real world, or in God's plan, or in what your soul really is asking for. So I mean, it's kind of like there's part of it, maybe a certain part of it. It's like maybe you have an ego, or a part of you, some this is what I want and I'm not taking anything else kind of part of you. But in reality, that's not going to work unless it's maybe with a deeper part of you that is in harmony with the universe. It is in alignment with your soul, or with God's plan, or I mean, with different belief systems, you call it different thing. I mean, the scientists say, well, there's an objective reality that you can't change, or maybe religious person say, well, God has a plan, and God will answer your prayer if it's part of God's plan, but if it's not, you can pray and pray, but it won't be answered. So there's a lot of ways to look at it and think about it.
Hmm.
But I think
Hmm.
there is something somewhere about is your own desire and your own miracle, is that in line with what's meant to happen in the rest of the universe?
There's another thought that, and in addition to this, David, I'm thinking the person who speaks the miracle word, where does that word come from? Does that person also engage an imagination?
Well, that
And
person, and for the most part, that person is someone who took a course in solution focused therapy, and they learned about the miracle question, and so they're asking the question that they were taught to ask. It might have nothing to do with them. It's just that they've learned how to ask this question. They'd say a miracle happens, and
is there a time when they can raise? You said they asked a question that they've been taught to ask. Can questions arise? That's what I was about to ask Sergio. Is there room for intuition in the miracle business? Like, do you find there's a spontaneity, an emergence of something suddenly? Hope is almost future distant. Is there a spontaneity, an immediacy, an intuition that arises, even when speaking the word or having or observing when its effect? Is there something like that?
Good. Well, I have assumed things like hope or love or, these very big charged words. Sometimes people think they have ideas, which we do. Everyone has ideas. But I've been turning it on its head and thinking, mm, I don't have ideas. Ideas have me.
Mhm.
So, same thing with hope. I used to think, yeah, I have hope. I'm a hopeful person. I'm an optimist. I'm an optimistic person. And I'm quickly realizing, oh, no, 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 it's the other way around. Hope has me. And hope is a, I wish it was measurable. It would be nice to have sort of like a hope gun where you could measure, sort of like a radar. Um, Maybe we will eventually, but at least not now we don't. But I think
Mhm.
hope is one of these things where we all have capacity somewhere in here or in here or in all of here to sense. And this hope, I almost picture it like a cloud, right? And it searches for willing vessels, if I may use that language. It searches for where can we land, because hope is always ever present, as is mercy, as is compassion, as is unity, if we are just willing to dare to look foolish, maybe to some people, look wishy-washy to some people, right? But I think, yes, I think this hope is, it's right there in the neighborhood of spontaneity. I mean, it has to be. Iterations. Uh, it requires this sort of dance interplay between what has already been set, but what is on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Without negating, right? I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We learn and we rigorously know the fundamentals enough so that we know where the boundaries are and we can explore them. That's where the spontaneity happens, right? Because as Dr. Sarnoff was mentioning earlier, right? Hey, my grandfather passed away, and you know what? Uh, I was never able to make amends with him, and this is why I'm in this crisis state. It's better that I not be here, right? If I had it my way, my grandpa would be back, and I would be able to talk about things, and it is a real thing. However, we can reinterpret the past, I think, sometimes. We cannot change the past, right? I cannot bring my deceased grandfather back, but I can uncover some things still and go into the memory and sort of work on the architecture, maybe, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I hope that made sense. I
Maybe
think.
you can still have a relationship with a deceased person, even though they're deceased. You still have them inside you, and you can still relate to them, talk to them, and change things in your own mind. Because there's two people. There's a person who died, but then
Mm-hmm.
there's also that person inside your own mind. And so the one inside your own mind is the one maybe that's important to you. It's affecting how it's affecting you in your life and the way you feel about yourself and the world, and that part is all still changeable, even
Right.
though maybe the past isn't changeable. But what's going
Mhm.
on inside you can always be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I felt like asking while you were speaking, and at least intuitively, spontaneously came to mind. You said you do not have hope, hope has you.
Mm.
And you said where it lands. And I was about to ask, I just heard the question. When hope lands in you, how does it feel?
It feels like energy. it feels like fuel. I oftentimes
Hmm.
picture a vehicle, and depending on the grade of fuel, right? Border towns, huh? So if I go into Mexico and I pump up gas at the Pemex gas station, most people suggest, hey, gas up on this side, Brownsville, Texas, the United States. That way you don't have to use their gas. And I remember thinking, well, why? It's gas. And, people told me, yeah, but the quality is not all that great. So, I think hope when I present myself, right? I present myself to hope, to understanding, to love and compassion and mercy. And I expect through repetition of practice that it comes onto me, or maybe not that it comes onto me even, it's just that I become more aware of this hope that is ever present. And it really does give me energy. It gives me a willingness and a desire to do XYZ. I mean, whatever is tasked for the day or for the month. Hope is sort of one of the sources of fuel, I think, that continues this vehicle that I call this body.
Hmm.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, what about faith?
Mm. In the same neighborhood as well, right? Faith is another one that is an unseen, however, very real thing. Very, very real. And the more I consider these things, the more I realize it seems like the unseen world is as real or more real than the seen world. Um, but faith is one of those things as well. You cannot measure it per se, but people they're moved by it because we all have this capacity to feel and allow ourselves to be moved, considering our heart is capable enough, right? I've dealt with my own biases, hurts, past betrayals, whatever. Uh, yeah, so I think faith is another one of those where it has you. You don't really have it. It's a response, really. It's a gift given from who knows where exactly.
So, Drew,
How about
have you seen the use of solution focus with the miracle question being effective? Have you seen it work effectively in your situations that you've encountered, or what's your take on it?
Well, I think my answer might be a little limited considering I don't have all that much follow up with the people that I evaluate, I think is the correct term. Um, I think so. I mean, sometimes I'll meet with a person and I will evaluate and give recommendation, and then I'll follow up with them maybe a day or two after. But I don't know as far as whether they're enrolled in counseling, right? Maybe bi-monthly, and there's some sort of uh, results coming from this sort of modality. I
Uh-huh.
would assume yes, though, because at least for me, maybe I'm too naive,
Uh,
but it's sort of instinctual. I It sounds good on paper. In practice, who knows? But I think it would be something worth exploring. Probably, I
sure,
think.
sure. Thank you.
It's an empirical question. Of course, in psychology, we talk a lot about empirically supported methods, like the research says that this is empirically supported. But I think we've talked about it before. In my view, that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. In other words, the research is so limited, even on these supposedly supported methods. How supported are they? The support is very limited in limited situations and for limited follow. Like you mentioned, follow up. I mean, uh, if you test the therapy by say teaching people how to think a certain way, right? You teach them how to think a certain way for 8 weeks, and then at the end of the 8 weeks, you give them a test on how they think, and sure enough, they've learned how to think the way you told them, and then you say the therapy is successful. But what happens 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, or 6 months later? Are they still thinking that way, or somehow they slip back, or they slip back into old ways of thinking, or how much does it really help them? Uh, but maybe in a way that's life. Like all of us, no one is cured by any therapy. We need it's really an ongoing process of living and learning, and we can learn tools, and they only work to the extent that we use them.
Hmm. I'm just thinking that the unconscious, the collective unconscious, where the imagination and all that it entails spring from the fantasy. The it contains, with that comes feelings, with that comes emotions, with that comes so many. I mean, there are color patterns, there are sound patterns, there are image patterns. And the question becomes, to what extent do all these things figure um, as the miracle unfolds?
Well, I can give an immediate example. When you asked the question about hope, I saw a big yellow sun rising in my heart, and the rays went up into my head, and my head was kind of melting a little bit, and then my thoughts improved. Like all of a sudden, my worries were eased, and I felt maybe I felt physically that my head was clearer, it was more relaxed, and that the hope would translated into thoughts about the future being better rather than the future being worse.
Mm. So it's energy. It's energy, Sergio. It's a form of energy.
I think so. I think the word tool, I think, is very appropriate. Uh, they're tools. And they almost, I think of a wall, I think of my wall. When there's no art pieces, it's almost like the wall is crying out, decorate me. For the love of God, put something that, has you in it, and yes, it's sort of hope and faith and these things. I think they almost, I was gonna say beg, but they almost beckon. Use us, allow us to use you. It's a reciprocity, and in that reciprocity, I think is where, at the cellular level, I truly believe I will find out. I will find out a way to measure these things. At the cellular level, there is a noticeable change for the better. It produces more energy, and it produces more, maybe, neural pathways, neuroplasticity, right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
When you're talking
Yeah,
about measurement, I think we already have the technology to measure the electromagnetic field of the heart and the electromagnetic field of the brain. And
Yes.
I bet if you hook people up when they're feeling hopeful, you notice what the difference between hope and despair is. I mean, you can see that in the way when I was thinking about the sun in my heart, it probably actually radiated some kind of energy that you would pick up, and if you had me hooked up to one of those things they use in Heart Math Institute in California, where they're measuring the electromagnetic field of the heart, you would probably see that. It looks different from before.
one colleague of mine at Lesley, as part of her PhD dissertation, she actually looked at hope and the extent to which it can, its implications for pain management. Could you imagine that pain? And I think she was suggesting that the deeper the sense of hope, the greater capacity and ability for minimizing pain. So hope may have a chemistry. I don't know if that's too advanced or am I being presumptuous here, but could hope have a chemistry, Sergio? If you think about it, I don't know what Rodney thinks. Rodney, you brought up this. Would hope have a
Well,
chemistry?
yeah, I think in the use of I want to say psycho immunology, in which they measure uh, hope and its effect on patients in who have grave terminal illnesses or serious conditions, and it's been shown that those who um, have a sense of hope tend to have better outcomes than those who don't. So yeah, they've been able to do some research and actually measure that and see the positive effects of that. So yeah, there's a whole field, that has looked at that. And
There's
so
a
yeah,
lot of research that shows that people who are prayed for have better health outcomes than people who aren't, right? Maybe part of that is that they know people are praying for them and that gives them more hope, right?
yes, I would say when I had my health scare right before I was going into surgery, they of course they ask you what religion or faith you practice, and so they sent in a minister to pray with me right before surgery, and so that was helpful.
Yeah, it worked. Look how healthy you are since then.
I,
So,
I, I think some of the faith things suggest that as long as a person has the ability to transcend what is themselves or him or herself, you tend to rise above the all that you've gathered to resolve your own issues and troubles. You dwell in that space. Suddenly, there's something called hope or something called faith. Or there is another one, if we were to steep, I think when hope was spoken, it was spoken in relation to faith and in relation to love, which some people call charity. Now, you can imagine the energy that comes from love or the ability to share. And that's a question, Sergio. Somebody says the brain is a social organ. When you, how well do people do when they are together after the miracle question has been asked? What is its impact on collectives? How do they behave one with another when they are discussing that issue or sharing thoughts about the miracle question? Do you feel a vibe?
The the flaps of a butterfly, right, turns into a hurricane somewhere else. I think it's a real thing. It's a ripple effect. It's something that is definitely tangible. I feed on it and I make sure, well, one, I don't bite off more than I can chew. But I definitely do feed off it, and I I think the more I'm in touch with my body, right, through physical exercise, the better I'm able to gauge these internal feelings. And you get a better assessment for, did this person actually take away from what I just offered in the sense of hope with this posing a
Mhm,
miracle question of sorts,
mhm,
or not, right? There's a great, she's an author and master ballet instructor, Twyla Tharp, and she was talking about the necessity of being in touch with your body so that you could be holistically healthy. As much as a person's intellect is important, your body also speaks to you. And not only does it speak to you, but it's a universal language. So when you talk about like heart to heart and feeling it, it's the heart does not speak English or Spanish or Portuguese or German or Russian. It speaks biology. So I think if a person is in tune enough and they recognize their own time and time again, I think yes, it's for me. I say it very humbly because I don't want to scare it, whatever it is, away. But yes, I think I am able to tangibly notice the difference when a person truly takes this and allows to rest here and incubate, and then hopefully they take it and they take care of it and they tend to it and they start with some treatment and they get with a good clinician, a good sort of person to sort of set the guardrails and continue on this path of recovery. So yes, I think so.
mhm. Wouldn't body also speak to mind to soul and soul to spirit? Does that matter?
I think it does. I've been in rooms where a person is a very different sort of spirituality than mine, however, are still spiritual, right? And we are able to recognize each other. I am not one person to believe all that much in quote unquote sides. More and more, that seems to be blurring. I seem to see there are a few things that divide us. So I have noticed my spirit to another person's spirit. Uh, to another person, they might say, "Oh, this person is a dark and bad practices spiritually speaking
Mhm.
because they have this title of whatever." But no, this person recognized in me, and I recognize in this person. Although we have different sort of approaches to this spiritual life, we both recognize, oh, we've both been there, wherever there is, and we have this sort of mutual respect and admiration, and we give space for more of this intertwining, or maybe not intertwining, but just communication to and from the greater network that is people.
Well, I've got a comment about this. When I think you and I may be related on that some of that level. I was raised as a scientist, so when I hear words like soul or spirit, or I'm always questioning, well, what does that mean? I don't really know what those words are. But one thing that happened to me after I left you in California, I went to visit my daughter in Sedona, and Sedona is a very kind of spiritual place in a maybe a different sort of way. But they have things. One person they had there was someone who takes photographs of your aura and interprets what the aura looks like. So when they took a picture of my aura, it was very it was like indigo and violet, which is supposed to be a very spiritual color. And she said that, well, I'm only like 25% mind and 25% body and 50% spirit.
Hmm.
And she can measure that, even though I don't know what spirit is. I don't know what she means when she says it, but I have that. I have whatever it is, whatever this thing that the thing is measuring. Maybe I'm half, but she said, well, you're out of balance. You're only 25% mind, 25% body, and 50% spirit. I said, well, I'm getting pretty old. Maybe I'm moving towards the other side. Maybe at my age, it's good to be half spirit. But I don't really know, but it's all a mystery to me. But
I think it's a good thing. I think, I mean, your capacity for reflection, you can literally feel change. There was a pastor, a principal of a theological college, who used to tell me that a man's God could be a totem pole. What matters is not so much the pole and what's written on it, is how consistently he goes to it. Because at some point in time, the transformation is going to begin in him or in her. And I think because of that tendency in us, because we are moving blood-filled beings, we are in motion, we are in fire in a sense. So invariably, we find ourselves being drawn to some things in ourselves, in our bodies, but everything that's in our bodies, as you say, Sergio, is also part of a cosmos, is also integrated, is also interrelated, and all of this is emerging now. You see, and then it is very, very important. And it raises the final question for me, and then I'll hush. Does a person need imagination to do that miracle thing, to ask the miracle question or to respond to it?
Hmm. My knee jerk answer is yes. However, I have a close friend of mine who, I believe him. He says he cannot picture things in his head. He
Good.
cannot, he uh we were talking about this maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And I see him at least monthly, if not every other month. We chit chat for a few hours, and we will discuss things like this. Sort of, well, because he's a father, right, of two children, and he's a little nervous, and how well am I going to be a father, and things like that. So I'll ask him things. Well, what would it look like? And he says, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, like in your head." He's like, "No, I can't picture things in my head." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Yeah, when I was around the second or third grade, we were talking about colors or something like that." And his teacher asked him, "Well, just picture a yellow banana in your head." And he says, "I can't. I can't." And ever since, he says he's been trying to, and now he's kind of just given up on the whole imagination up here.
Did-
Yet, uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sergio. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well,
Go ahead.
just to close circle on him, he says even though I can't picture things like that, I can still talk about in conversation, not just with me, but with other people. He can sort of lead to this. Yeah, okay, this is what I can do. This is what I. Even though he can't really see the picture in his imagination, he can at least, I don't know, use words to. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of. I think of my mind as a theater
Yes, to
often.
capture the picture. Yes,
Right.
Well,
yes.
we addressed
So
that.
Yeah.
The three
Yeah.
of
I
us are
wonder.
working on a book on active imagination, an active imagination workbook. And one of the things we say in there is that, if you can't see something in your mind, just think about it, however you think about it. And try this experiment. Think about a tree, and then tell me what kind of tree is it? Is it a maple tree? Is it a
mm,
pine tree? If you know what kind of tree it is, maybe that means you can kind of tell me what kind of leaves it has. Does it have leaves like a hand, like a maple tree, or needles like a pine tree? So in some sense, they do have an imagination, and then
mhm,
they're not seeing it like you'd be seeing with your eyes, but they have a way of thinking about it. So maybe it's all, people have different ways of experiencing it, but maybe you
Yeah.
all have some kind
Yeah.
of imagination.
And I wonder too, Sergio, if he ever asked him if he dreams at all, if he has any recollections of dreams, you know, and so that would be interesting to know because sometimes maybe if he can't visualize things that in the present moment, but during the sleep state that he's actually does have some sense of because it takes some sense of imagination or experiences or whatever to be in the dream state and experience that. So
that is a really good point because, yes, he has told me sometimes he remembers his dreams. So that is a testament to everybody has that capacity. We just don't always realize it in the present tense, how you're saying. That's a really good, yes.
Or maybe it's an unconscious ability that hasn't been developed consciously.
Right,
That's what we're
right.
saying in our book, that you can work on this and you practice like a meditation, like playing the flute. People tell me how I sound good. I'm so talented. But when I first tried to play, it took me a week to get any sound at all. I couldn't even. I'd blow it the hole and it would be nothing. Maybe.
it's funny too. Just going back to the discussion on I mentioned about dreams. Now I'm a very vivid dreamer,
Mm,
you know, but during my surgery, I once I was under, I can't remember anything between the time that I was put under and the time that I woke up. Absolutely nothing. And so I don't know whether I was dreaming or where
mm.
my mind went to or what was going on, but I don't remember anything. I just remember
That anesthesiologist did a great job. He put you out
getting
that far. He put even your unconscious mind to sleep.
but my yeah. So well, like I say, I always thought that puzzles me, the fact that again I dream every night, some very vivid dreams. But during that time period I don't recall anything. So
Well,
I don't
I've
know.
got
Well,
to go back to my day job in just a couple of minutes.
mhm.
So I wonder if we could wrap up here. And I know when you and I were talking in your show, you said, well, we could have a part two. So certainly, Sergio, if you want to come back, maybe we can have a part two on this show as well.
I
Yeah.
would be honored to, and I would love to continue this if my schedule allows. Yes, I mean, just let me know ahead of time. I have the link now. Truly, truly, it's been a pleasure. I have many things to think about now for the rest of the weekend. But yeah, I appreciate all of you all's insights and questions and giving me space to come and just talk and listen. Yeah, I'm still taken aback a little bit when people find interest or shared interests such as conversations like this. So thank you, and yes,
Yes,
I will.
yes,
Well, thank you, Sergio, for getting us to think, as we would say, kind of outside the
yes.
box and look at relationships, uh,
Mhm.
uh, between active imagination and other areas that are out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Sergio.